All right, so we're going to render some components here. So just a reminder is where we left off. We are in the standalone front end part of this application. We set up our index.html page, and we tested that out with a JS folder and an app.js file, which threw in some inner text there for that div so that we could actually see this thing working. So the terminal, notice that VS Code, if I move up in my video here, has this terminal, and I can have a new terminal going on there. And I'm actually still up and running from the last video, as you can see here. And that's what's generating the hello world that we're getting here at localhost 1234. So we can see that that's actually functioning for us. If you want to at any time shut your server off, you can just do Control-C. This froze on me here, so give me a sec. Is it back? All right. Right here. Well, my terminal seems to have froze. Let me do a new terminal here. PM start. I'm going to make sure I can turn this on and off when I want to here. So let's say we're up and running, which we are right there. And then Control-C, and there we go. Control-C shuts it off, and you can see it's waiting for my command. So I don't know why it froze there, just with some switching around that I did. Okay, so back in our index.html, this is all of the HTML that I'm going to write in this file. Not that you wouldn't need more, but in this demo, this is all I plan on doing. So I'm going to throw a header in here with a ID of header. And I want to throw a footer in here with an ID of footer. And so what I thought was, and you know, you could code out your header and your footer to exist right here in this document. But for you to understand the rendering of components, I am going to make separate components for the header and the footer. These aren't going to talk to the API. These have no information. These don't care about what's in the API. So these will be a lot easier for us to get started with. So you can see how these render on our page, and then we can go from there and get more complicated with actual GET and POST requests. So this is where we're going to start, and we'll dig into the header first. So let's go ahead and remove this test code from our app.js, and let's make a header variable. And we'll query select the header ID. So don't forget to have that hashtag in there. And let's go ahead and set the inner HTML here on this header. And this is where we'll use our ES6 syntax. And we're going to go ahead and make a nav bar here in our header. And so we'll go ahead and throw in an unordered list. We'll do nav home. Got the home button there. We've got values. And we've got our to-dos. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and close off our nav. Just backtick in there. Right, let me hit enter on this. I like having my backticks here on lines 3 and 11 to line this up. Then we'll have our nav open. Looks like I actually threw a backtick in here instead of a single quote. There we go. And VS Code does a nice job of really lining things up for us, so you can see there where your backticks are. That's your ES6 syntax. These are your template literals that are wrapping this whole thing here in our inner HTML. I've got my nav bar, and inside of my nav bar I've got an unordered list with 3 list items. And so spacing is really important here. It just helps with the readability of your code. And so let's go ahead and do an npm start on our app and see what this looks like when we go out onto the browser. All right, we can control and click here. And there's our nav bar so far. So if I go ahead and inspect this, it will actually show us the exact code that we had rendered there. So you can see the inside of our header. So this is placing it on that index page. It's grabbing it, putting it inside of that header. And then it's the nav with the unordered list and the list items. Now we'll clean this up later, and we'll put some CSS on this because it will, maybe just align it with some flexbox. See if I can make this. Can I make this any bigger? Not right now. We'll align that with some flexbox, and we'll style it, and it will come out looking pretty good for us. But just imagine that as our nav bar right now in our header. We'll be able to click on each of these and do things, so that's going to happen. But for now, that's all we have, and that's fine. But an issue that we're seeing so far is that this is being done in our app.js. And so we could build this whole entire page out inside of our app.js, but then we don't have as much good control of our organization and of how we want to manage the state of our app. So that's why we are going to proceed to build these out with components. So let's go ahead and break out some more organization here. So in my JS folder, let me make a new folder called Components. And in that, I want a new file, and we're going to call this header.js. And so what I'd like to do in here is take this code that we have, this entire template literal that you see here. I'm going to cut that out of my app.js. I'm going to go over to my header, and I'm going to place it in here. So we need to do some export code up at the top. So I'm going to do export default function header. And then let's return that template literal that we see there. Okay, so there we go. We are going to bring this in. Put that right there on the same line. All right, that looks pretty good. So there's our header.js. So now we have our first component. So let's go ahead again and change the app.js. And we're going to have this header be a function that we have the ability to use. So again, there's our header variable, and we will set the inner HTML of this variable to be that header component that we saw there. All right, and now let's go ahead out and check our app. So my app is still running, and it says that it's built again, so every time I save it'll rebuild in 56 milliseconds, so then I can go back out and check out what this looks like. And I've got nothing going on here. So there's still some more work that needs to be done here in app.js. And what I'd like to do is create another function called page build that will basically manage all of these components for us, and the first one of those that I will place in here is that header function. And we can go ahead finally and run this. So this is going to be what always runs on our page. So we'll run page build here, and then let's see what that does for us. Still nothing going on. So we need to make sure that we bring this over properly into our app.js. We don't have access yet to our components. So let's import header from components/header. Okay, now we've successfully brought that in, and it took a little longer to build this app, so that told me that it was grabbing this component, bringing it in, and I'm expecting to see a better result here, and I do. I now see the same thing I had before when we had working code in our app.js, but we've sort of stored this in its own area. So there's a lot that was just happening here from an organizational perspective, but it's going to be this formula that we continue to go through here as we build this thing out with more complex details. The content that we want to render, we have full control over it now as a component. And this is our component, and it is called header.js. Now we have to have the ability to export this so that we can bring it into our app.js. And we can control that that's actually being seen and dealt with when we render it in our page build. Now the order the things happening here doesn't matter, because what's really happening here is we're grabbing that in our div by this ID of header, and that's where it's placing it. So just so that you understand this, the index.html is in control of where this is rendering. It's rendering here as the first item in our application. So I could put some text in here, like initial load, so that you can see that perspective, and then that text will eventually be replaced later once we do something. But there's our nav bar at the top, right? That's in this div for header, and that's a component. And then we have the initial load of our app div right here, so we can inspect and see what's going on there. Yep, that's in app. So we've got our header from our component, and we've got our initial load from our app. And we don't have a footer on this yet. So what I will do here is leave you with the encouragement to follow that same process. See if you can figure out how to build a footer component. And what I want to see in the footer component is just a copyright WCCI 2019. But can you build it out as its own component? So go ahead and pause the video, give it a shot, and then when you're ready, you can continue to run this video, and we'll build out that functionality as well. So go ahead and give it a shot, and let's see what happens. All right, welcome back, and let's see if you were able to set up the footer component. And we're going to go ahead and do our components and create a new file called footer.js. So this will be our footer. And we'll go ahead and export our footer component here. And then we'll set up our ES6, and let's make this a, I don't really care how you did it, I'm going to make it a small. That'll show the copyright, but if you did this different, as long as you had some text in there, that's great. All right, so there's our component. We can come into our app and sort of follow this same process here. So we could import it. So we'll bring in our footer. We'll add that here in our page build. Whoop. Let's see, it's going to add the component. I have to make the function first. So let's go ahead and do that. Copy and paste can be dangerous. So just be mindful of that. See, if I reference it wrong, it's going to let me know it's a little lighter there. Notice that this hasn't been used yet. See how it's a lot lighter? Notice that this import hasn't been used yet, but watch what happens right here. So VS Code is going to give you some clues. So there it is. I'm referencing that component. Now my import comes in. Still have not used this function anywhere, but watch what happens when I put it in my page build. Okay, now there's no longer highlighted, and the variable's being used. So everything's being referenced here. Okay, so let's go through this slowly so you can see everything that we've done so far. There's our imports at the top. We're calling that page build function, and then here's where we're controlling our components. All right, so let's see the result of this out there on our app. And bingo, we've also got a footer in here now. So now we've got the three different sections of our application. We've got our header with our navbar. We've got our app. That's going to be where all the hard work is done. This is where our get and post requests are going to go. And then we've got our footer. But we've built out some components here. So we've so far done some pretty good work. Also, I think as we go forward in other videos, we need to make these clickable, right? So we can be able to click back and forth on our nav bar here and navigate to the different, or change the state of our page. So our state hasn't changed yet. It's just in this one view that we're seeing here. So we're going to do that in upcoming videos as well. So nicely done, and we'll see you as we start to get a little bit more complicated with this in the next video.